good evening, everyone, and welcome to Frecuencias, bajas, Charlas musicales, episode 117. Today we have a special English edition as we announced this week, and we are very happy to have a very special guest for this first English edition. We are going to introduce in a few minutes, but as we know, he don't need any introductions, but we are going to introduce it to you, and then we are going to chat with him this hour we have every week. And as you know, we have been doing this in Spanish for the last 2.5 years, and then we decide to kind of opening a little bit to everyone. So we decide to do this English edition for the first time, and one per month from now on. We are very happy to welcome you all on the other part of the world in YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And I would like to invite you to subscribe the YouTube channel to don't miss any of the episodes of Frecuencias, bajas, Charlas musicales. As we say every week, don't 1 hour is not enough time. That is why we are going to really get quickly to my co-conductor, that is David Lopez, since the beginning, May 2020. David, how are you doing? How are things in Washington, D.C.?
Thank you, Patricia. I'm very excited to have this episode special edition today in English for the first time after 2.5 years of speaking in Spanish and going to several countries or having guests from several countries in Latin America. But I think it is important to open it a little bit more, especially because there is a lot of things happening outside the Spanish-speaking world, and there's a lot of things that we can learn from our guests. Today, I feel very lucky. I was talking to Steve before we started that I had the chance to play with him around 2016, 2017 when I was at Texas Tech University, and he went to our school for a few days. I remember we were very lucky. It was not short. It was like a whole week of master classes and private lessons that ended with us going to TMEA, which is like one of the most important teacher conventions in the U.S., and that's in Texas. And because everything in Texas is so big, I have a vivid memory of this event being like, I'm not kidding, 30,000 people from all avenues of music. And we were one of the groups that were showcased in that edition of TMEA. So I remember we played some tuba and euphonium works, and Steve was a soloist. All of this to say that I feel very lucky, and to say thank you to Steve for accepting this invitation. Last time I had the chance to talk to him, I had to pay tuition. So I this pays like, okay, it's going to be free. We're going to have him for questions. Thank you very much. And that's exactly what we hope this edition becomes. It's like a good avenue and a good resource for people to kind of dig a little bit more about what it is that you do, and a bunch of interesting questions, and we have about what it is that you do and how you do it. So Steve, welcome to our space, Frecuencias Bajas, and thank you for accepting the invitation. And this time I don't have to pay anything, so I'll thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you.
So, well, as I say before, he don't need any further introduction, but Steve and Mead have been on the top of the game since so many years as a soloist with the Euphonium. I will see as a pioneer of the instrument too, also as a pedagogue, and his masterclass worldwide, they are well known, and also as a businessman, not only because he have his own shop where he ship different music and instrument parts, but also as a bass artist. That is why we would like to kind of inquire him about different things of the career. I think everyone know the CV of Steven, and if not, go to the website and you can read it. It is there. And Steven, the first question I would like to do to you is we was talking a little bit off the cameras. I would like to ask you, how do you manage to stay really on the top of the game after so many years that you are doing that, and having a lot of very young, pushing euphonium players coming from back, and you still there, and it is for me very impressive, because that's show me your passion for what you do. And how do you do that?
Well, firstly, good evening to David and Patricio and everyone that's listening. It's a great honor to be here in this English edition. And you did say before there wouldn't be any normal questions like how old were you when you first played, all that. So we're straight into a really interesting question about keeping on top of things. I guess that's the expression that we're using. It's because I have a passion to play, and that passion is the same. It's burning just as brightly as when I was 16 or 20 or 26 or 35. So the body gets older, and the passport tells you that you're becoming kind of ancient. But the passion for playing music and for playing the instrument every day to a high level, it doesn't diminish. It doesn't diminish 1%, in my career, I've seen different things change. I've seen a lot more opportunities come for euphonium players. And that's why I'm really happy that there are 10, 15, 20 outstanding young players, a lot younger than me, that are trying to follow the same route that I did, And my musical journey has been an evolution from high school player, joining a brass band, having a high school teaching job, to starting teaching at some of the greatest institutions in the UK, and trying to develop a freelance career that's sustainable. I think anyone can make a big noise for 5 or 6 years, but to do it for 40 years is a lot harder. And it's purely and simply because, number one, I love it. Number two, I can't imagine doing anything else. Number three, I have a really strong competitive streak in me, which I've always had. I don't know where it comes from. My parents weren't super competitive or pushy, I just found myself playing an instrument. I found young players when I joined the National Youth Brass Band when I was 15. I found so many great young players that I'd never heard of, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is the brass band world. Because I was born on the south coast of the UK, which is far away from the epicenter of brass music in the UK. So now I live in the Midlands, so I'm connectable to London, connectable to Manchester, thank goodness, because I've taught there for 33 years. So keeping on top of things is about attitude, it's about passion, it's about method, because I still love to practice. I've always enjoyed practicing. I meet people say, oh, I prefer playing with just in the band, Well, that's okay. That's important, and that's kind of social as well. But if you're going to be a musician at the top of your game for 40 years, you better like practicing. You better enjoy your own company with your instrument and keep going some days, even when you're not happy with things or whatever. So, yeah, look, I love it. I hope I can do it 10 more years or 20 more years. God and nature will tell me if that idea is not very sensible. And as for the young players coming up, that's great, because actually that motivates me more to do more, because I don't want to be overtaken by the pack. I hear some technique of some of the players, and it's like, right, where's that Clark book again? Let's go through it again. Let's go through it slower. Let's go through it faster. I've always been happy with my stamina. I've always been kind of happy with my sound, although it never stays the same. It matures like we do. High notes have always been okay. But, in my day, when I was 20 years old at university and practicing every day, the hardest thing that we had to practice was the Gordon Jacob Fantasia, Horowitz, And the repertoire now is pushing us onwards, you know?
But wait a second, that is your fault, part of. Or
I'm very
you
proud
develop
about
a lot.
Still now when I commission a piece, so what, you know, what about this? I said, yeah, look, if you want to write that, that's okay. If you want to write that in 6 flats, and if you want to write a top G flat, that's okay. And of course they do it, and then I have to find solutions to it. I mean, the absolute prime example was the Norwegian composer Torstein Agard Nielsen. So when the Lahti Finland ITEC came along, I forget what year it was it 2000 maybe?
Yeah, probably around, yeah.
Harry Lidzler had some money to spend on commissions, and he said to Torstein Agard Nielsen, could you write a euphonium concerto of Stephen Mead and the Lahti Philharmonic Orchestra? So he wrote to me and he said, so what would you like me to? I said, just write what you want, write anything. Well, what do you find difficult? I said, that's my problem to solve. And my God, 6 months later, I get a solo part, 14 pages long, and it's the hardest thing I've ever seen. With a cadenza culminating in super high A flat about 15 minutes into the concerto. And I almost called him to say, it's too much. But I'm so glad I didn't, because that pushed me forwards for that whole year. And so repertoire helps us, you know, and when you look at, let's take a piece like Blind Spot by Gil Rusher, you know, it's a fun piece, but the technique is fearsome. There's about 50 people that can play it now, easily, you know. So the repertoire makes us better, it makes us practice more, it inspires us, if we're not inspired already. But it's not all about technique, and one of the things, I don't want to get too heavy here so early, but as you get older, you realize that playing the euphonium is not just about, you know, super this and pedal this and glissandos and, you know, the loudest, rudest pedal tones. It gets old really quickly. And so for me, it's about everything is in the service of music, and we should always be comparable with professional cello players and violinists and trumpet players. So there's nothing, just because the euphonium is a facile instrument, it's no excuse for not concentrating on absolute musicality and quality all the time. So that's like an evolution, because I did used to enjoy playing very fast music and multiphonics like it was going out of fashion, you know, and so forth. So I try to keep my technique red hot. I try to keep motivated. I've played 4 hours today, and that's really not unusual. It's nice at the end of the vacation because there's not many concerts. I can really design my practice. 3 sessions, 1 hour, 1 hour 30, 1 hour 30. I can do what I want. And that's a nice situation. So I'm happy that there was a chasing pack, Patricia. I'm really happy. These guys play so well, and girls.
I must say, I really admire that what you describe, that you need to have passion about what you do, because sometimes I have the feeling it's not happening with every player, you know what I mean? I mean, it's
I feel
not
that too.
like everyone there.
I feel that too. And I can't relate to it because I've always had the passion, you know? But I think if you're going to do something in your life to a really high level, boy, you have to immerse your whole body, your whole spirit into it.
Agreed.
It's so easy to be mediocre at everything you do. Just
Agree.
So listening to you, I was thinking, Patricia, like we talked about this a lot in our previous sessions.
I'm sure, yeah.
That kind of demystify these great players, and listening to Steve talking about practicing, and you know, makes me wonder, because sometimes we, the ones that are outside in the world, we think, well, Steve Mead doesn't need to practice. Like, oh, come on, he's already there. Everybody knows who he is. I bet his career is kind of in autopilot now. Like, you get the call, you go and play. But hearing from you that you still practice, and you practice 4 hours a day, and that's not unusual. It should give us a hint or give a hint to those who want perhaps to achieve or follow your path, what needs to be done in order to achieve it. Nothing is going to come if we just wait for it. It looks to me like that very same passion has allowed you to be a go-getter, to just not wait for the opportunity, but go look for it. And so in that sense, I want to ask you, like, how we were talking about like the logistical parts of it, how it is good to play, and it is a very important part of what we do, is to play well and to do it well. Now, I feel that sometimes there's a disconnection between those who dedicate all that time to playing well and master the instrument, but so many of us forget or are not taught that side of the business of being able to sell who we are, or being able to open venues and to open opportunities for our instruments. I feel that I know a lot of good tuba players, I got a lot of good euphonium players that can get around the instrument very well, but they don't know to send a proposal, they don't know how to reach out. How does Steve Mead keep such a busy schedule during the whole year, during so many years? Like, I want you to tell us, how's that side of the business? How does your phone ring quite often, or do you have to be sitting there and all the way you do with your instrument, also sit down and sing? How does that work?
Well, it sounds incredibly complicated, but for me, it's just normal life. You see, it's normal life. So no, the phone doesn't go crazy. I get, let's think, Facebook messages, maybe 25 a day, maybe 20 emails a day. The ones that are important, like Patricio says, can you send me a photo for publicity? He gets it within 30 seconds.
That's true.
So, no, I think one of the good things in my life is that I didn't go to a music conservatory. I went to a university, and a university academic course taught me to be rigorous about things, to read and study and be precise and make plans and meet deadlines. And so that's always been kind of in my DNA. In terms of actually the business thing is really interesting, because I feel now that people see me as an entrepreneur, and really I'm just a simple musician trying to make a living. But it's really and you use your intuition. So I remember, actually, the reason that the Euphonium store started is that in 1999, I had the one and only kind of crisis with my embouchure. I found that the lips didn't really work very well for about 4 or 5 months. It was at the point I was recording lots and lots of play-along CD for Dahaska, Hal Leonard, and I was doing like a book a day in a dry studio in the Netherlands, and I basically smashed my lips. So for about 5 months, I didn't know if my playing career as a soloist would ever continue. So I thought, oh my gosh, are you going to need a backup? Certainly you're going to need a backup when you get older. So I had some mouthpieces that I designed. I had some music it was small. I had probably a total of 25 products. And I just started selling them, and people bought them. And then I upgraded the website, and then just added products every month. And suddenly, euphoniumstore.net was a go-to site for euphonium and baritone players. So I don't think I'm a whiz at it. I wish I could make the website look better. In fact, this is how lazy I am. I have a brand new Euphonium store, which has been designed for me 2 years ago. I simply have to update all the products, and it would go live, and it would look like Amazon. But I don't have time to spend hours and hours uploading that new site. So good old Euphonium store chugs along with the same look and familiar look that people have enjoyed for the last 12 years. And frankly, some days it's too much. I get 8 or 12 orders a day, and I want to practice, and I need 2 hours to put things in envelopes and go to the post office. So, and then I have other commitments like teaching commitments, online lessons. I do work for the Dennis Swick Company, so we're working on new designs for that. So some days I feel like, you know, this thing of spinning plates where you get these rods and you see how many plates you can spin at the same time without one falling off. I have weeks like that. And I'm lucky here at my house. I have a music studio just other side of this wall. It's pretty much soundproof. I can play 24 hours a day. So I don't do it so much now because I'm a bit older and I get tired. but there were times 10 years ago where I would start my practice at midnight and I'd practice until 2:30 a.m. I'd sleep for a few hours and then drive to Manchester and teach all day. So one of the things you learn as you get older is that your body is not a machine. It's not unbreakable. So, you know, you have to look after it. And I cycle 5 times a week and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But going back to that original question, I think I just follow my instinct. My dad was a school teacher, God rest his soul, the most wonderful man I ever knew. Mum was a typist for a legal firm and did other odd jobs. So it's not a high-powered Mead empire that it was just... You know, I just went crazy about playing the euphonium, and everything I've done has been to try to support young players in their developing careers, try to innovate new products that make our playing experience easier and better, mouthpieces and instruments, and commission pieces from composers because that makes our job as euphonium players easier because, you know, when I left school, people said, well, the problem with euphonium, you have no repertoire. And it was kind of true. It was kind of true. When I was 18 years old, the original music that I had was around 20 pieces. And now it's around 1,000, you know, in my private library. So that makes me really happy. And that drives me on, you know, the job isn't finished. You know, if I drop dead tomorrow, I wouldn't be able to discuss it with you because I wouldn't be here. But I would be quite happy that I've done a lot of work, and I know that there's lots of young players will carry on. And you know, a legacy is only a legacy if it carries on. So, you know, I remember having that conversation with Brian Bowman when he was leaving University of North Texas. A legacy is only a legacy if it continues, you know, which of course it is, you know, with David Childs there. So yeah, I feel a huge responsibility to do things properly, to do things well. And, you know, my health has been up and down, but I never discuss it with anyone. But I've never canceled anything, and I've never canceled teaching or anything. So I'm one of life's optimists. I'm always positive about what I do. And now I'm thinking about what time I have to get up to practice tomorrow because I have to leave the house at 9:30. So it's a passion that never goes away. It's absolutely, you know, hardwired into my system.
That's really amazing. And one thing that is crawling in my head is you say 20 pieces when you start, and now 1,000. And you follow your instinct, but I am pretty sure you have got a few no's in your career also. I mean, when you start and try to get some solo gigs and, you know, less repertoire, how do you kind of manage this resilience to grow and to keep there so that you can develop this freelancing career as a soloist with an instrument, and I hope you don't misunderstand me, that doesn't exist on that way. I mean, you made it.
Well, I was probably the first to do it, but, you know, there are people that are doing it quite brilliantly now, and that, you know, that makes me happy. But I feel I was the guy that was pushing against a door that seemed to be locked, you know? So the example I would give, when I was 15 years old, some people listening may have heard this story. When I was 15 years old, we had a careers day at school where the guy in charge of careers would sit in an office and we would go in, have 10 minutes each. Come in, Mead, sit down. So you play music, don't you, Mead? Yes, sir. And Mr. Max did, this was. So what are you going to do for a career? I kind of went quiet for a moment and I just said, I'm going to play the euphonium, sir. How do you spell that? EUP. Okay, so we started looking through his book and it was checking the index and the reference, and he said, no, you can't do that. He couldn't find the word even anywhere in the index, in the forward, in the, you know. So he said, I found tuba. I think maybe you could be a tuba player in an orchestra. Yeah, maybe you could be a clown in the circus, you know. So it was like, I couldn't understand it. I really couldn't understand it. And when people say, what motivates you to keep going? It's like, I want to revisit that guy in that room in my school to say, just check the book again.
Yeah.
Check the book again, look up the word euphonium and see what you can do. Check the repertoire, see where you can study it. See all the military bands that feature euphonium soloists. Think of the number of CDs that euphoniumists have recorded in the last 30 years, you know, and special concerts where the euphonium player has been featured. So, you know, for me, it dates back to that. There I was, a budding, ambitious 15, 16-year-old player, and everyone said it was impossible to play the euphonium as a job. You know, just trottle off and play with your brass band, and you'll have a happy amateur life. I couldn't accept it, and I've always said that the reason the euphonium never made it to the orchestra, and therefore into conservatories, you know, 120 years ago, was really a historical accident. You know, Berlioz knew about the euphonium, Holst, you know, all these people knew about the euphonium. But because there were different varieties of it in every European country, you know, from the Czech baritone to the German baritone to the French saxon to the Italian bombardino, composers just kind of freaked out like, well, this thing exists, but we can't write for it because we don't know what the hell it is. When they heard it, they loved it, you know. Yeah. There's you know. So I wish in a way that the valve we're rewriting history now, but if the valve had been invented in 1750 and the euphonium was complete by 1800, then when the symphony orchestra became a big beast in the middle of the 19th century, we'd be in it.
Yeah.
We'd be in it, and occasionally the bass tuba would come along and help you. But, you know, you just think of all the Tchaikovsky symphonies where you could have a euphonium solo playing all those amazing melodies, you know. So we missed the boat. So when you miss the boat, you have to find another way to get there. And that's kind of what we've been doing in the last 30 years of playing catch up to the musical world, especially the establishment, because wind bands and brass bands, you know, in America from the turn of the century, you know, Italian bands from the middle of the 19th century, they've always been amazing players, but they've been on the periphery of mainstream music. So part of my mantra is to get the euphonium into the mainstream, get it on classical music stations, you know.
That's great, and that gives me the I have a really small question to link to this one, and is we have discussed with David a lot of time the place of brass instruments in the soloist world, and we are really behind. I mean, how do you see, or I would say it in our way, do you have the feeling that the euphonium is earning a place like a cello soloist or like a I would say violin soloist, or we still behind as a brass players, how they saw us?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with what we do. I think the big problem is that we're talking about who you're going to play with, a symphony orchestra. What a symphony orchestra is doing, slowly dying, because their audiences are getting older. They like what they know, and they know what they like, and they like Mozart and Tchaikovsky and Mahler and Brahms, you know. I played a concerto in 2007 with the Stuttgart Philharmonic. It was a really big gig. It was the Rolf Rudin Hallows Concerto, you know? And he had to fight, we had to fight for the Stuttgart Philharmonic to accept that Rolf Rudin would write a concerto for the Euphonium, because they commissioned him to write a solo concerto. And they wanted piano or violin. He said, a euphonium concerto. What, you know? So anyway, to cut a long story short, we did it. I performed it in a packed hall, and it went really well. It was one of the most beautiful memories I have, you know, from that decade. And after the concert, backstage, I was carrying the flowers, and this little lady came up to me and she said, You're the euphonium player. I said, yes, that's right. Sorry, I shouldn't do German accents. You're the euphonium player. And I said, yes, that's right. And she said, I am really, really, really cross. I'm really angry. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. What? She said, I've been coming here to this hall for 50 years. I am now an old lady, and only now do I hear your beautiful instrument. Somehow, you know, and it was emotional. I still get emotional talking about it. She felt cheated that she'd heard all these brass instruments, and she hears this sound, this beautiful. In fact, I have a review somewhere which I keep, and it was like the golden sound shimmered, you know, and this is exactly how this old lady was describing it. So she was really angry that she'd never heard it before at the end of her life. So we know there's nothing wrong with the instrument, and we have some great repertoire. But what major orchestras are going to take a gamble on an unknown soloist with an unknown instrument with an unknown piece? You know, it's very rare. You know,
yeah.
So someone
and that is the sad part of.
Yeah, it's like, you know, we've had prejudice against the euphonium from the end of the 19th century. It's not that people don't like it, and it's not that people don't respect us. It's like the business side of things with a huge orchestra is not good. So it shouldn't put us off. To some extent, I don't write to symphony orchestras saying, you know what you need? You know. I'm kind of, I did it when in my 30s, but now I still feel I'm very lucky to be able to travel around the world playing with great wind orchestras, with great brass bands, with amazing pianists, playing at festivals. And there are people that hear the euphonium for the first time, and they do come up and say, it's the most beautiful sound I ever heard. And I'm happy to, let's not call it a battle, but I'm happy to win those battles, to go to places where people don't know and get that magical reaction saying, oh my God, that is one of the most beautiful, human, expressive sounds I've ever heard in my life. So, you know, for people like David Childs, for example, who has quite a good foot in the orchestral world, that's fantastic. You know, he has the Welsh connection with the Youth Orchestra, National Symphony Orchestra of Wales. He's done prom concerts, the Carl Jenkins Concerto, the Alan Hodinott, you know, so that's amazing. And he's using the contacts he has to take the euphonium into the orchestral world. But, you know, what could we do next? We could ask composers who write for the orchestra, please include a euphonium, for example, you know?
Right, yeah.
Mark Anthony Turnage, you know, Harrison Birtwistle, there are composers, but not many, and not many great works, new works for orchestra come along, because orchestras are very worried about their audience, who will only turn up if it's a work that they know and like, especially post-pandemic. You've got to get a 90% house. And so now is not the time for gambling with unknown pieces. So I think what we should do is make beautiful recordings. We should try to get them played on classical music stations. We never put our hands up and say, okay, we give up. Never. And the next generation have to be even more empowered and be more communicative. But this is a point, Patricio, you made 20 minutes ago, and I think David also, the fact that a lot of really good brass players are really good brass players, and and have not much more in terms of reaching out to change situations, to write letters, to arrange meetings, to send demo recordings to festivals. We kind of practice and think that somehow what we do in our practice room is going to somehow seep out into the minds of people that are out there. And
so this leads me to a question that I asked everybody is, how many times have you been told no in your life? Because I come from the
when I was at university, about every girl I asked said no. And for the next few years, I got lucky in the end. But yeah. Oh, you're talking about music now. Okay.
Yeah, no, I think you ended up doing pretty well for yourself in that aspect. But I'm talking about music, because you might think like Steve Mead. Everybody says yes to Steve Mead. Who's gonna say no to Steve Mead? But I always like to play like devil's advocate and play the role of that orchestra manager that has to convince the board and the musical director that Euphonium needs to play. And you know how I want to know how that process comes about. Like,
well,
how you do that initial like contact with administrators, and how many of those proposals end up being a solid no, and how many of those start developing over time and end up being a project.
Well, this probably won't surprise you, but when I was in my early 30s, when I was really pushing to do new things, for example, I was 28 years old when I visited the US for the first time. I was 29 when I visited Japan. For me, that was a moment of maximum push. And I wrote to, I think, 250 orchestras, and I got one kind of interested reply. So they didn't write and say no, they just didn't answer. So in a way, that's much more cheerful than going, no, thank you, but no. But it's like people applying for job interviews, you know? I don't think this aspect of our lives is any different from real life.
But it's great that you say that, because I mean, as you say, some of us think that when you practice very hard in the practice room, someday it's going to call you Berlin Philharmonic and say, oh, Mr. Mead, we would like to make a solo concert with you. And if you don't work for that, and if you don't have this resilience, and if you don't keep trying all the time, it's not going to happen.
Well, if I was serious about, I've got some context. You mentioned the Berlin Philharmonic. They're playing Mahler 7 at the Albert Hall this weekend. They didn't call, I'm devastated. But if, it's another no, At my age,
exactly.
It's hurtful. They've got some German player harping away on a baritone horn, but I'm sure he'll play amazing. But if I was serious about the Berlin Philharmonic, what I would probably do is go to Berlin for a month. I would hang out with Stefan Dorr and all the guys and girls I know there, and I would arrange a meeting with the orchestral manager. I'd offer to play a short concert for them. I would really go and I would chuck everything at it for a month. I would rent a place, and they say, look, there's a chance in 3 years' time, we have a lunchtime concert for deaf children, maybe we could fit you in there. There could be an in. So I think you just get to a point in your life where you just say, you know what, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, but I'm not going to put my head against a brick wall and just make a hole in my head,
But I just love what you just said, because that shows how you play hardball, like how if someone wants something really badly, that's the level of commitment that in your personality you expect. Yes. So if I'm a euphonium player listening to you and wanting to do Berlin at some point in my life, which I don't think how many euphoniums, I don't know how many euphonium players aspire even to think that might be a possibility, because that might be another thing. Us as musicians, like, at least we see a lot of barriers before starting our project. Oh, I want to do a recital here, but I don't know if I'm going to get the venue. But I don't know if people are going to be willing to open up spaces for me and say yes to me. Yeah. So just what you just described is how far would you like to go if that was a project that you would consider seriously, tells me that that's the drive you have for everything. And so,
Yeah.
in that sense, like if you want to catch up with Steve Mead, you probably need to play hard ball as well. You know?
Well, you need to be creative. As I say, one of the problems is that you sit at home and you can play the Arbon from beginning to end with no mistakes, and you think, I've made it. No, you haven't, because it's only the lady next door thinking, please shut up. You've been playing for 6 hours. It's getting into the musical world, making contacts. I know 20 years ago, there were one or two composers that I would see at every brass festival or every wind band festival. They'd be there with their bag. They'd have some recordings that they gave out. They'd talk to people. And now these are famous composers who got commissions, who wrote beautiful pieces, test pieces for brass band competitions. And it started by them getting on a plane, getting on a train, going to a festival and walking around. Hello, here's my card. I'm a composer. Here's a copy of a piece I've just written for your instrument. And they worked hard. They worked hard. They have to work harder because on paper, their works don't sound. At least I can go around playing and people go, wow, it sounds great, So, yeah, I learned a lot from seeing how other people develop their careers, The challenge for me at the age of at the age of 60 is I don't like saying that word. Is what challenges do you set? I mean, should I go to Berlin and hang around and plead with people, let me play, like a 14-year-old gypsy violinist would do, play outside somebody's house, play outside John Williams's house, until he comes out to say, what's this, boy? Let me write a tune for this in the next movie. And there's people that have done that. And if that is the way you want to go, then go for it,
Yes, absolutely.
I've heard beautiful stories in my career about people just going really over the top to get noticed,
And the other thing is like, Kevin was my professor at Texas State while I was there, said something that it really stuck with me during the rest of my days there, and I still live by that motto, is that it only takes one person saying yes to you. See, during your career, you're going to get a lot of no's from everybody, from your girlfriend, from a job opportunity for an audition, but it only takes that yes that starts that revalidates all that hard work and can lead to different things. So,
but you should never take for granted that a yes will come naturally. That's the thing. This is why this daily work, which means, there's that lovely saying, the harder I work, the luckier I get, So that's true. That's kind of stuck with me as well, since I heard it when I was like 15 or something. Yeah.
No, that's great. And Stephen, have you been, let's say, putting aside because your passion, have you been show with the finger as a crazy man because you are so passionate about what you are doing along the road?
Shown the finger. Explain that.
I mean, people saying you are kind of crazy because you all the time thinking on euphonium and pushing.
Well, I don't think they ever. I think they would probably think that, but they'd never say it to me. Sometimes, for example, last week I started posting pictures about apples in my garden, and it had like 400 likes on Facebook, and I think most people was just so happy, like, thank God, here's a post not about the bloody euphonium. I think it was just sheer relief. And today, from Amazon, comes an apple peeler. I was going to put that on Facebook. It would have had 1,000 likes. You put an apple on this machine, and it's got 2 blades, and you turn the handle, and within 5 seconds, the apple is peeled, cored, and you can put it straight into the apple pie. I made 3 apple pies today for the village because we're having a festival this weekend. And that's big news for some people because it means that I'm not a total euphonium geek, which I am, but I try to disguise it, by doing other things randomly.
So that's very interesting. David?
So I wanna inquire a little bit about the. I don't know how to say this, but I'm gonna say it anyways. Like
Come on, out.
that business part that you have, and we all know that you pretty much like stepped on Besson and helped recover the company because they were gonna disappear.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
I think that's a bold move, because not everybody is willing to, jump in a deal like that where a lot of money is involved. So, uh, how did
Well,
that decision come about, and what was the point that you said, like, you know what, I'm gonna risk everything I have to jump on this deal and make it happen?
well, I didn't put any money into Besson. I mean, what I did was help Buffet Crampon, if you like, make a decision about the fact that they would take it on. They decided that the instruments would be made in Germany, but they wanted me to help them with the transition. So I'd seen, as we say, I'd seen the writing on the wall for at least 4 or 5 years. They moved the factory from Edgware to a place called Croxley Green, 20 miles north London. They started making the parts in Germany and shipping them to be assembled with 80 rather disgruntled, unhappy workers that they were only assembling. That was a recipe for disaster. There was the problem of metric measurements against imperial measurements. So some of the calculations meant the parts didn't fit properly. Valve groups came in slightly distorted. Oh my God, it was a, and for me, Besson has always been in the blood, let's not try to cut my hand off, but you would see the word Besson written inside, So when I saw this going down, and then I think it was in December 2005, I got a call to say Besson UK has stopped trading. The factory is locked. This was me. This was losing a family relative. This was like my grandma dying. This was something terrible. So I spoke to a few people because we didn't know then that Buffet Crampon were going to buy it. We had no idea. There was no logical transition, at least for a month. And then I got some calls to say we may be interested to buy the name and the designs, but we don't want to buy the factory and we don't need those workers. Sorry for them, Could you help us? So I said, well, what do we do? He said, well, go to the factory. Werner Douay from France will meet you there, and we're going to go through. We're going to open up the factory. We're going to go through and look at the instruments. And it was a most extraordinary day because this building that was normally full of noise and chatter and machines was silent, and there was just these pieces of metal lying around. A lot of stuff had disappeared. Sadly, it had been taken. But we committed that we would get the best reference model that was available. It would be sent to Germany, and then the next month, Buffet Crampon decided that they would buy the name Besson, and they would rebuild all the instruments, cornets and horns, originally in Amboise in France, and then the low brass. So the Euphonium was the first one. And so we talked about, should we make any modifications? And initially it was like, we're just going to rebuild the best that they made. And then if anything needs to change after that. And so in the October the following year, 2006, I got a call. Would I go to Markneukirchen in Germany? They've produced the first Prestige Euphonium based on the old design. And it was a very emotional moment because from thinking that the company was potentially lost forever, I went up to this room. There was Gerhard Meinl, there was Ferdinand Kleinschmidt from the Geretsried factory, Werner Douay, Carsten Goff, and a few others. There was a room full of people, and this Euphonium sitting on its bell in the middle of the floor, and there's almost like lights on it. And I was like, okay, could you test it? So I just sat down on the chair and I played one note, and I knew it was more than okay, but I didn't tell them for at least 5 minutes. I played all sorts of things, initially very easy, a few long tones, then some arpeggios, then some solos, and finally I said, you know what, gentlemen, because it was only gentlemen there, I'm not sexist, gentlemen, I think this is probably the finest euphonium I ever played. And it was just an outpouring of emotion. I think Gerhard Meinl was pretty confident because within 10 seconds I heard champagne corks popping. He must have had a feeling. But no, that was the rebuild. And I was really honored to be part of that, just as I'm honored to go to the factory every month since then, you know, except for the pandemic. I was there Monday this week, you know, and so we now have all the instruments built there, cornet and tenor horn, moved from Amboise. So they're all in that amazing place. Fantastic workers, 180, 190 of them under one roof, you know. So, you know, I think as you get older, you certainly also appreciate tradition and you respect tradition more. The fact that there is a living tradition that goes back to the first Besson instruments in 1860, you know, and they're still there. I'm incredibly proud to do that, you know. Same with Dennis Wick, you know. People say, how on earth did you get involved with Dennis Wick? Well, again, some people know the story, but in 1995, my good friend Roger Webster said, Steve, JK mouthpieces, asking him to do a line of cornet mouthpieces. And maybe you could do a euphonium line. So as Dennis Wick Company and Besson were interconnected at that point, I said, look, I need to go and speak to the managing director, David Humphreys. And he says, talk to Dennis. So he didn't say don't do it, he said talk to Dennis. And I said, well, he's never had anyone else connected with his iconic mouthpieces. Talk to Dennis. So I called up Dennis. Oh, Stephen, what a marvelous idea. He just said yes straight away. Send me some drawings. And 3-4 months later, there's a beautiful picture of me and Dennis Wick in the Besson factory, 1995, holding up the first mouthpiece that we made. And that was, say, 1995.
I just love to, like, we have touched from practicing the instrument, from commissioning pieces, from getting involved with manufacturing the instruments and the mouthpieces. It's just lovely to see somebody that is involved in every step of the process, from creating the instrument all the way to playing it right and to opening like new opportunities for people that are coming behind. So.
Yeah, but it you know, at the time, all I was thinking with Dennis Wick is, if I can get a mouthpiece that helps me play better, this is great. It wasn't a business thing at all. It wasn't a question of commission or anything like that. It was like, so I play on a 3AL. I posted a picture on Facebook a few days ago. I played the same 3AL mouthpiece from about 19 when I was 15 years old until 1995. I mean, that's, you know, I just thought, well, if I can find something that makes me play 1% better, I'm going to go for that. And that's been my mantra for every single development with Besson is, if it plays better for me, it'll probably help a lot of other people as well. Yeah.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
David, you are unmuted.
I don't know if you have a follow-up question, but I would like to ask Steve one last question, and it's about online lessons. I know that before the pandemic, like, it was a concept we all managed, you know, but it wasn't like such a common occurrence to have online lessons. I want to ask you what you think about them, and if you have seen like improvements in your students that take private lessons, if they help, and what are the shortcomings of having a private lessons? In other words, like, what are the positive aspects and of online teaching?
Well, I would start off by saying is that face-to-face lessons are better. You just hear everything about the sound. You're aware of how somebody breathes. You're aware of their emotions. You can look in their eyes. You can, so but the question is how much worse are online lessons to real lessons? And during the pandemic, when I'd erased everything in my diary for 2020, it's like, well, I have to do something. I have, so online lessons at the RNCM, it was okay, but it's only as okay as the technology. So a lot of the kids were having lessons on their mobile phones with a mouthpiece in a mobile phone. And so it was like, I have no idea what that piece is you just played. It sounded shocking. Well, that was the Horowitz first movement, I thought you were having some kind of asthma attack. But of course, the technology has got better. Everybody started buying microphones, and Zoom got better. The original sound helped. So I actually met, I would say, at least 25 or 30 people I would have never have met because of the pandemic, because of necessity of online lessons. People, I teach a young lady in Abu Dhabi. She's a French young lady, Elise. I've got to know the family really well. And she can be in Abu Dhabi. They're 3 hours ahead, and we can have a lesson once a week. And it's really cool, We actually had a face-to-face lesson in France during the summer, way better. But for people who don't live in epicenters of brass education, it could be the only thing that you get. And so I'm not knocking it. If somebody had said to me 4 years ago, what do you think? No, avoid it. No. But now it's like, absolutely, I see the merits. And the sound has got better. Computers have got better. But it is only as good as the technology. And we have to be very patient, because Zoom tends to speed things up. So instead of you hear you go, did you rush those notes? No? I heard and they go, no, I didn't play that. Okay. So there's that rhythmic stuff that's really frustrating. But the saddest experience for me is that the RNCM came up with a scheme where they knocked two practice rooms. Well, they had two practice rooms. They built a hole between the rooms and then put 3 layers of glass and then a microphone each side and a speaker system. And it was really no better than me sitting at home doing it on Zoom. You could see them, but it wasn't real. So I understand why they did it. It was a safety thing. So hats off to them for that. And it was closer to real life. But I got better sound sitting at home in my slippers and my pajamas. Whoops, there's a confession. Could have been worse. So yeah, look, I give face-to-face lessons 10 out of 10 and online lessons 7.5 out of 10. That's kind of how I think about it.
Okay, but that's actually something for those who otherwise wouldn't have access to that kind of instruction.
Absolutely, yeah.
Which is great. So I would like to, we're coming on to the end, and I would like to really thank Stephen for taking the time to be with us. It is unbelievable that we have you here today.
I've really enjoyed it. It's been amazing. Thank you.
We need to rethink this 1 hour theme for the special guests.
Yeah, I think I have a ton of questions I would like to make to Steve.
We just started, but I appreciate you, Steve, for accepting our invitation, and it was great to talk to you again.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah.
Definitely very inspiring. I think that after this session, I want to grab my tuba and
practice
and march down the street playing it.
Keep grinding. I mean, that's the only way. There is no magical solution to opening more room for tuba and euphonium playing in the world. So
probably the National Orchestra in USA is going to have David tomorrow outside of the hall playing tuba until they get a solo concert.
I'm just gonna do that. I'm gonna move to DC. I'm gonna get a hotel. I'm gonna hang out with all those people and start playing at random places. Or
just follow them home and play a recital in their garden. while they're having their
I'll let you
dinner.
know.
Let me know how it goes.
Yeah,
Oh
I'm
my
gonna
God.
say Steve Mead told me to do this.
Oh no.
Bad idea.
And they'll go, Steve who? Yeah, then that's the problem.
So that's great. Stephen, again, thank you very much. Really appreciate to have you here. And it was a really joy to listen the insight of the business directly from one of the persons who is really rocking it. And we are very happy to have you here. Thank you very much.
Absolute
Thank you
pleasure,
to everyone who was on the other side and watching. Remember to subscribe. We really like to keep this space and keep working to offer you always better international, very impressive artists like Stephen. Also, thank you very much. Thank you, David, for the time. That's as always every week. And we see each other next week with the episode 118. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.